Okay, guys, so in a minute, I'm going to read you an article all about Yardangs. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, you're going to find out. But before you start, you might want to just take note of these two questions because I'm going to ask you to answer these two questions at the end. So you can write them down on your whiteboard if you want. Question one is, what Earth systems are interacting to create a Yardang? So we've got, remember, geosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere. So what two Earth systems are interacting to create a Yardang? And then what causes Yardangs to be bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom? So go ahead and on your whiteboard or your notebook, just write those questions down real quick. And then you can unpause the video and get started. All right, Yardangs, sandblasted. Desert travelers know them by different names. In Egypt, they're called mud lions. In Tunisia, they're called koarkour. In Iran, they're called kalut. But if you find yourself face to face with a yardang, you'll be wondering what it is, not what it's called. Yardangs are ridges of rock and loose sand found in arid or dry places. Many yardangs look like mushrooms or upside down boats. They can occur alone or in groups, called fields. Yardangs usually line up in the direction of the wind because they're shaped by the wind itself. Wind is a powerful natural force that causes erosion. As wind blows over land, it picks up and removes sand and small rock particles in a process called deflation. When wind blasts the land's surface, the sediment it transports acts like sandpaper, wearing away and changing the shape of the land in a process called abrasion. Gradually, over time, only the yardangs are left. So, if you ever find yourself facing a yardang, you might not be sure what to call it, but at least you'll know what it is and how it's formed. So here's a field of yardangs. Yardang comes from the Turkic word yar, which means steep bank. And I guess this has pretty steep banks, right? Okay, so I think here we learned about what Earth systems are interacting, but we don't really know how it formed yet. So let's look here. High flying sediment. Wind can be a force of weathering, the breaking of rocks into smaller pieces. As those rocks bang into each other, they form smaller and smaller pieces, including pebbles, sand, and even dust. Then wind can pick up the dust and sandblast it against the land and form yardangs. But how exactly does wind transport this sediment? It depends on the size of the particles. Wind easily picks up and moves dust particles because the particles are very lightweight. Wind tosses the dust thousands of meters up and thousands of kilometers away, but it moves sand grains differently. Sand gets picked up briefly, but it's too heavy to remain airborne for long. Gravity causes the sand grains to fall. The grains get bounced, rolled along the ground, knocking other grains into the air. Sand grains aren't transported as far as dust. Strong wind can slide and roll larger sand grains and even pebbles along the ground too. So here we have a diagram showing that the wind is going to take the dust and blow it up, but the sand and the pebbles are going to kind of stay lower to the ground, which makes sense if you look at this, right? The bottom's worn away way faster than the top, probably because you got the sand and the pebbles kind of down at the bottom and the dust up at the top. White Sands National Monument in New Mexico has some of the few examples of yardangs in the United States. Did you know that some scientists think that the Great Sphinx in Egypt started out as a yardang and was later carved to look like a lion with a man's head? And think about this. Mars has yardangs. So what does that tell you about the conditions on Mars? Think about that. What is that? The fact that Mars has yardangs, what does that tell us? All right, guys, answer those two questions, which are these, right? What Earth systems are interacting to create a yardang? And then what causes yardangs to be bigger at the top and smaller at the bottom? Go ahead, answer those questions, and I will see you back in the meet in a second.